Welcome back to Car Pinionated, our slightly irreverent show about cars, the car industry, and driving in general. Last week, we talked about several road trips, the Blue Ridge Parkway, Route 50, and the Pacific Coast Highway. We had a lot of fun, and we had so much fun that we had to split the show into two pieces. So tonight you get part two, and we go international. And I hope you enjoy it. Maddie, you have another one?
I do. I need to talk about Key West and
Okay.
Route One, US Route One, um, from Miami all the way down through the Keys. It's definitely worth it. It's a very slow going road, so give yourself time, plenty of time. It's not one of those that you rush. But I think the first stop I did was Isla Morada, which is kind of in the
Mhm.
middle of the Keys. It's about halfway between Miami and Key West. First night there was really, really cool. There's a lot of great coral in that area. Um, and I did some kayaking around there as well and just sat on the beach. Like, yes, I'm in Florida. Like, let's enjoy this. And then you get to that very long and terrifying 7 Mile bridge,
Mm.
which you've seen in all the movies. License to Kill comes to mind, if you're a James Bond fan. I was 16, newly licensed, and that was one of my first adventures. And I was driving my mother's Cadillac, which is huge. And I'm like, okay, can't close your eyes because you're gonna get off the road. But
Yeah.
I'm just like, do this. So that was a little scary. But so if you're afraid of bridges, have a friend drive you. Because it's 7 miles long. It takes like 10 minutes to drive all the way as the length of it. Um, some of the other wildlife that I found really unique in that area was the key deer. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard of them.
Oh
This is
yeah.
Yeah.
right. That's that. They come out at night and they're very shy. But if you can catch them, that's just like something really unique and special. And then with Key West, like, is
Yeah.
just such a fun, really cool place. I'm a book nerd, so like hanging out with Ernest Hemingway at his house there, and all the history with his books at Key West. Speaking of wildlife, the chickens. There's a bunch of chickens that
Yes.
just roam,
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like, just doing their thing, clucking along Duval Street there. That was just like really fun chasing them around as a little kid. Um, and Margaritaville. I'd love to go back. I got kicked out of Margaritaville when I was there.
Was it because you
Be-
were 16 with a Cadillac?
yes, they definitely didn't want 16-year-olds going into their bar. But I'd like to think when I'm retired, I would be a parent head just sitting there in Margaritaville drinking my drinks. I guess I'm the woman to blame. um, License plates that were on the wall. I'm a license plate collector, and so as a 16-year-old, I'm just like is enthralled by all these license plates on the wall, and they're like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
no, get out of here. You don't belong here." And then us road geeks have to stop at mile zero, right where US one
Mhm.
starts or ends, depending on your perspective. And and the southernmost point in the continental US is also in Key West, so um,
This
definitely
is
worth a drive. Yeah, it's just another really special road trip. Give yourself plenty of time though, like really really enjoy the moment. Pull off to the
yeah.
side of the road. Some of the older bridges, um, where they've rebuilt parts of Highway One, so they left the older bridges for
Right.
like fishing, and so
Mhm.
you can kind of get onto these older bridges and only go to a certain point. Um, Totally take advantage of that. Just go get out of the car, stretch your legs, and sit by the water, and maybe do some fishing. It's a very cool experience, unique experience.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Jeff, you got another one?
I love, first of all, I love thinking about that drive between Miami and Key West. I remember the first time I made it, I had driven from Detroit to Miami and stayed the night at a friend's apartment in Miami. And then, the next morning I'm like, oh gosh, I'm almost there. Let's get in the car and go to Key West. And, then the SpongeBob SquarePants slide 4 hours later. It's like, my gosh, I'm not there yet. What the heck? It doesn't look this far on the map. But it really is. I mean, it really is such a great drive, and some of the best and nicest people ever are in that part of Florida. They sure know they have something special.
Yeah.
I think you know the one of the drives that stands out to me was happened on my first trip to Australia, and this was 20 years ago now. I was there for almost 2 weeks and took in a lot of different things. Spent a lot of time in Sydney, in the city center. Took a trip up to Port Douglas up in Queensland to snorkel on the Great Barrier Reef, which was outstanding. And then at one point back in Sydney, drove from Sydney to Melbourne to finish my stay there. And it was a particularly notable time of the year. It was January. And in Australia, January is kind of bushfire season. And uh, over the last few years, I think their lightning sparked fires have consumed thousands of acres of bushland in Victoria and in New South Wales, in those two states. And I happened to be driving through kind of at the height of it. I remember stopping halfway through at a hotel somewhere and getting up the next morning, and I could smell smoke, like campfire smoke, all around me. And there was a haze in the air as I was going out to the car and packing up and getting ready to go. One of the reasons the trip stood out to me so much was something I learned about cars in Australia. So Australia, like many former British colonies, still drive on the left side of the road, and all of the steering wheels are on the right side of the car. And Australia at the time still built some cars. They don't really build any anymore,
Right.
but at the time they did. And when you bought a car in Australia, you would find a couple of different things. The cars that had been built in Europe or in some other place that didn't have sort of indigenous, cars on the wrong side of the road, they would take the entire control set from the left side of the car and move it over. So you would get in the car and you had lights and turn signals over here and wipers over here. And that was fine. But the native built Australian cars had it the other way around. Lights over here, signals over here, wipers over here. I rented 2 cars on that trip. First car I rented was a Saab 900. Everything was pretty much where I expected it to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second car I rented was something called a Mitsubishi Magna, which was essentially the Diamante here in the US.
Okay.
It was built in Australia. And I set out, there was a little bit of rain, and I attempted to flip the wipers on, signaling a turn. Then I tried to signal for a lane change. Wipers came on. This happened the entire drive. And it was funny the second or third time. The 19th time I did it, it was no longer funny. Somehow I made it to Melbourne without tearing the rubber off the windshield wipers or ripping the stalks off the column in frustration. But that has always been a memorable drive for me, A, because of what was happening around it, and B, what was happening, the drama happening inside the car.
Right.
But that was great. There was at one point, there was almost another Australian road trip years later. And it was during a different kind of milestone trip. I was in Perth in Western Australia and had planned to take the Indian Pacific Railroad from
Right.
Perth
I
to
remember
Sydney.
this. Yeah.
However, the morning that I was supposed to leave, there had been a derailment and the train was canceled. So the question then became, okay, I have to get to Sydney to pick up the next stage of my itinerary. How am I going to do that? And I had 5 days or so to do that. And for about 40 seconds, I considered the possibility of driving across Australia. I am super glad I didn't, because I don't.
That's ambitious.
My understanding is that the seminal 1993 film Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, is in fact fiction, and would not be nearly as fun, fabulous, or easy to drive across Australia as it was for all of those people to drive from Sydney to the interior. So that was abandoned pretty quickly. But yeah,
That was the famous trip where you sampled many of the fine family of Ford cars.
that's correct.
Yeah.
The in the UK it was the Ford Fusion, which was not a sedan but a small MPV based on the Fiesta, and in Australia it was I think it was a Falcon XR6, I think, which was pretty cool.
I've never
Yeah.
even heard of that. That's fun.
Yeah, Ford never stopped making the Falcon in Australia until it stopped making the Falcon in Australia, which would have been 2021 or something. I don't think they make it anymore, but yeah, they kept building Ford and the General Motors division in Australia just kept building cars the way they built cars here in the 70s, where you had cars that pretty much looked the same, except they had slightly different grills and interiors, and they got completely different names.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
Oh, wow.
kind of the land time forgot in that way.
Yeah. See Pontiac G8 or
Yeah,
Chevy.
right.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly. The Pontiac
Yeah.
G8 was a Holden Commodore.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna, for my last one, I'm gonna sit closer to home. That I really like heading out the Mass Turnpike and onto the New York State Thruway. And it's a gentle kind of rolling thing. You have the river on one side, you have a set of mountains or hills on the other side. And I really like it. Syracuse is a cute little community. You get to Buffalo at the sort of at the end of the route there, which you can go over into Niagara Falls and things like that. So it's not dramatic, but it's a nice ongoing, if you're looking to kind of relax on a drive and kind of move out that way. That's what I like. So
There's a lot of great destinations off that. I mean, you think about like the Adirondacks,
yep,
the Finger Lakes. If you're into
yep,
wine, that's an amazing place to go. And then Buffalo is kind of my second hometown. So if you couldn't tell by the way I talked, and like I'll just brag about Buffalo all day long. The food, the Buffalo Bills, of course.
yeah,
Rochester is a hidden gem
right, yeah,
too. Not too far off the thruway. It's a little ways off, but yeah, there's a lot of really great Letchworth State Park outside of Buffalo is a really, really cool place to go hiking. There's a gorge.
yeah.
Um,
Frederick Law Olmsted did a bunch of city design in Buffalo.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right. Yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
We were talking, one of the other towns rides we were talking about also had Frederick Law Olmsted. And I'm blank. Oh, I think he designed the grounds at the
The Biltmore.
Biltmore. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. You do whole like trip between all the Frederick Law Olmsted parts.
Oh yeah,
mhm.
that would be amazing.
Yeah. So, well, this has been great fun. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Jeff. And so we're going to close it up for another week of Carpinionated. One of the things that we've been doing is asking people for pictures of that weird car that you like that no one else seems to like. and a little explanation of why you like that. We do have one here that is quite unique. This is a 2009 Scion TC Coupe submitted by Jeff. There's about 200 hours worth of work in the car. He says credit goes to Vic Rods and Armand Cote Jr. for body work and mechanical work. Jeff says he did all the fur. He calls it Shaggy. Shows it at a lot of local shows in the Connecticut area, and he built it in memory of his brother who passed away unexpectedly. So thanks, Jeff, for sending this in. So that's it for this week's Car Opinionated. If you have any questions, concerns, you can email me at dstewart@fox61.com, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.